it is my honor and pleasure to take part in this roundtable organized by Professor Igor Kariwec and the Kazimierz Twardowski Philosophical Society in Lviv. I will try to share my screen. Just let me know if it is working now. Can you see my slides? Or we should wait a little bit?
Yeah.
Yes, there are. Yes, okay. Let me know if there are any problems and I shall start. Yes, my subject is social justice as a value in the Twardowski's school. I am very glad that you choose the problems of axiology, in particular ethics, for the roundtable this year, because the problems of ethics of morality were very important for Kazimierz Twardowski and for the whole his school. I will focus on one value which was especially important around Twardowski's environment, namely on the problem of social value, or social justice. Let me start from clarifying the subject. What can we mean when we speak of social justice in terms of philosophical school? Firstly, we may mean practical dimension of the problem. Namely, we may ask how the ideals of social justice were implemented in this group of people or by members of this group, or whether the members of this group contributed to the realization of the postulates of social justice in their environment and in the society. Secondly, we may ask for theoretical dimension of the problem. Social justice is a typically philosophical concept, so we may ask whether, and if yes, how this problem was analyzed in this group of philosophers. Thirdly, we may combine these two dimensions and ask were the actions of members of this group somehow connected with their philosophical views? For instance, were their actions in this domain inspired by their views? Of course, there is no place to discuss all these problems exhaustively. I will focus only on some of them. The plan of my talk today is the following. I will start from some facts about the Lvov-Warsaw School, which are essential from the point of view of social justice. Then I will focus on the concept of social justice, which was analyzed by members of the Lvov-Warsaw School, such as Ajdukiewicz and Maria Ossowska. Then I will present an example of a philosopher that realized the value of social justice in his life, namely on Kazimierz Twardowski. And I will end with few remarks about the general attitude of Twardowski's school called anti-irrationalism in connection with social justice. Let's start from Kazimierz Twardowski's school. A philosophical school is a group of philosophers characterized by some factors: time when they were active, place of their activity, interpersonal and intertextual relations, as well as its social structure. I think there is no need to speak here among the people interested in the history of the school a lot about the time, space of substantial character of Twardowski's school. However, in the context of social justice, it is reasonable to mention some facts about the social dimension. And I will go there. Yes, the social structure of Twardowski's school. It's essential to mention that Lwów is historically a part of Polish Commonwealth, but in the end of the 19th century, Poland was divided, and Lwów and the whole Galicia became a part of Austro-Hungary Empire. In the end of the 19th century, there were 30% of Poles, 28% of Jews, and 17% of Ukrainians. Of course, these proportions were different outside Lwów in this area, where more Ukrainians inhabited. About 1900, Lwów, together with Krakow, were the most important centers of Polish culture, but it was also an important center of Ukrainian culture, more important than the historical center of Ukrainian nation, namely Kiev, which was in these times strongly Russified. These proportions reflect religion classification into Roman Catholics, Mosaistics, and Greek Catholics. Usually, the majority of representatives of all nations or confessions coexisted in peace, but the tensions had to appear among people living in such multicultural society. Nationality structure of the university in Lviv about 1900 was also interesting. In the whole university, there were 1,460 students, and among them 716 Poles, 443 Ukrainians, and 284 Jews. In philosophical faculty, there were 77 Poles, 36 Ukrainians, and 19 Jews. So we may see that the university society reflected approximately Lviv society as a whole. Now, the second important factor when we speak about social justice, namely emancipation of women. In the period in question is the time when women start to appear at university. In 1897, women were approved at University of Lviv, at first at medicine and philosophy faculty. In 1897, there were 70% of women among the students of University of Lviv. In 1912, 17%, and in 1930 at philosophical faculty, 30% of students were female. Yes, and the third factor which we should mention when we are talking about the social structure and social justice in the school of Twardowski are traumatic political events. While we should mention that in the time where Twardowski was active in Lviv, there were some important political events, such as the World War II, Polish-Ukrainian fights for Lviv, Polish Bolshevik War in 1920. Then, after 20 years, there were Nazi and German Bolshevik invasion in 1939, 6 years of occupation. After 1945, Lviv became a part of Soviet Union. Warsaw also came under communist regime of Soviet provenance. Because of these circumstances, there were many social tensions and sometimes bloody conflicts. I think that both Poles and Ukrainians find it very painful. So after mentioning this social structure of the Lvov-Warsaw School and these factors that contributed to the picture of the Twardowski's school, I will now focus on the problem of social justice and the analysis of this concept provided by two representatives of Twardowski's school. I will start from some comments of Kazimierz Ajdukiewicz. Ajdukiewicz was a student of Twardowski and proposed his analysis of the concept of justice in 1939. In fact, he presented his analysis of the concept of justice on the first anniversary of Kazimierz Twardowski's death. So we are now meeting also on this occasion. It's just this is an important fact to mention, that Ajdukiewicz talked about justice just on the same occasion. Ajdukiewicz analysis of the concept of justice in general, but he also showed that what we call social justice fits in the more general conceptual scheme. Ajdukiewicz starts his comments on justice from stating that the term justice is used ambiguously, and it causes some important misunderstandings. That is why there is a risk of a conceptual misunderstanding, and it even happens that contradictory social postulates are proposed in the name of justice. Such contradiction may have two sources: in substantial difference of opinions or just in conceptual misunderstanding. According to Ajdukiewicz, the controversies over justice are usually of verbal or conceptual character. According to Ajdukiewicz, in the most basic sense, justice is a property of actions, and more closely, actions which are not morally neutral, So they consist in secondary sense in providing someone with some good or depriving someone of some good. In the second sense, justice is the property of some rules or laws. Ajdukiewicz approves the general Ulpian's intuition that acting justly is giving suum cuique, may all get their due. He develops this simple intuition into the following formulas. John acts justly with respect to Peter if John does to Peter what Peter deserves. And John acts unjustly with respect to Peter if John does to Peter what Peter does not deserve. In the next step, Ajdukiewicz distinguishes between strict and clement justice. In the case of clement justice, one may refrain from doing something bad to some person, even if this person deserves it. Such kind of justice is acceptable in some circumstances, for instance, in the relation between mother and child. However, in social contexts, such as school or a court, only strict justice should be applied. Next, Ajdukiewicz steps is to state that the concept of justice, such defined, takes different shapes dependent on various conceptions of what does it mean that someone deserves something. Needless to say, from the point of view of the social justice we are interested in here and now, it is extremely important who determines the criteria for this deserving. And Ajdukiewicz introduces further distinctions between what one deserves according to the letter of the law, what one deserves according to the spirit of the law, and finally what one deserves according to the rightness. This one he calls moral justice. Now, if we approach the concept of social justice, we should look closer at this last moral concept. Ajdukiewicz states that there are two most important rules which are treated as basis for the moral justice: the rule of equal remuneration and the rule of equal measure, EM. According to the second rule of equal measure, all people have equal rights. No man deserves more or less than other. Of course, simply understood, the rule of equal measure contradicts to our sense of rightness. Ajdukiewicz writes, a thief deserves prison and a benefactor deserves reward. So the equal measure rule needs to be specified. Ajdukiewicz emphasized that the concept of this rule is negative. That no one deserves more only because it is this person and not someone else. We may express these intuitions as follows. We've got individual equal measure rule. No person deserves more just because it is this person. And general equal measure rule. No person deserves more just because they belong to this very social group. Ajdukiewicz states that in the spirit of this general equal measure rule, people fought for the abolition of state and family privileges, for the equality of men and women. They struggled for equality of people of all nationalities and origins. Well, let's state that almost 100 years later, people still are fighting in the name of these rules for the social justice. That's how we may place the concept of social justice in the conceptual frame of justice in general. I find this Ajdukiewicz proposal an interesting one. And I would like to add just a short remark about another analysis of the concept of social justice, which was provided by Maria Ossowska. Maria Ossowska was a representative of the second generation of Twardowski school. She was not a direct student of Twardowski. She studied under Jan Łukasiewicz and Tadeusz Kotarbiński in Warsaw. She analyzed the problem of justice in her fundamental book, Moral Norms. Ajdukiewicz was a type of Twardowski school, let's call it static analyst. He analyzed conceptual structures in a certain momentary cross-section. Ossowska's analyses were, so to speak, dynamic. She was interested not in what, in our sense, social justice looks like at some point, but how it is it changes over a short or long period of time. Well, she noticed that these changes can take various forms. In Ajdukiewicz's analytical apparatus, we would say that the principle of general rule can change in various ways. Firstly, according to Ossowska, when people fight for social justice, they may mean to increase the scope of application of our general rule. This is the case, for example, when political rights, for example, to women or ethnic groups that were so far deprived of these privileges. Secondly, to introduce new rules of the form of this general rule. This is the case, for example, when these or other groups indicated by our rule are granted the right to work, to paid leave or free education. And finally, sometimes this fight for social justice means that people want to respect the existing rules of the form of GR. In this case, for example, people oppose various forms of exploitation. This was this part of my talk today when I presented these philosophical, analytical aspects of the problem of social justice. I'm strongly convinced that analysis of some concepts may be useful in all ethical areas because they show various meanings of the word and point these elements which are essential for morality, for the sphere of morality, and how this concept may introduce the sphere of practicality. And now I'm moving to the third part, to the example of Kazimierz Twardowski. Once again, I will not present Twardowski's activities in Lviv in its totality, because I suppose that all participants of our meeting know these facts, but I would like to focus on some elements. Twardowski was the founder and most important personality of his school, not because his unquestionable achievements in philosophy, but because of his all-embracing influence on his students, on philosophy of this period and on the society. As you know, Twardowski was educated in Vienna. He was student of Franz Brentano. Then he got the chair of philosophy in Lwów and remained there for 35 years. As a professor of philosophy, Twardowski fought for social justice in many areas, for respecting the existing rules, for extending them, as well as for introducing new rules of social justice. Important Twardowski's activities are the following. He lectured philosophy for many years. He founded philosophical seminar and trained his students in independent thinking and problem solving. He promoted 45 doctors of philosophy, incredible number. His university lectures concerned all philosophical disciplines, and they were extremely popular. He also were active in university and state, Austrian and then Polish. Twardowski's fame was connected with his influence on education on many levels. For instance, he proposed a textbook dedicated to primary school teachers. He was interested in pedagogical ideas, which were analyzed, among others, by Olga Honcharenko. He was interested in high school teaching, and this interest was connected also with his activities in the Society of Teachers of Secondary Schools in Galicia. But Twardowski was not only interested in pedagogical ideas, he was an incarnation of these ideas. And let's just quote two of Twardowski's students here. Ajdukiewicz said, "Everyone who knew him would say that Professor treated everybody equally. His students and auditors were Polish, Ukrainians and Jews. Despite the spirit of those times, which was in no way conducive to that attitude, Twardowski saw no difference between them. The students of these three nationalities showed the same respect and devotion for him in return. In this way, first of all, by being example himself, he brought his surroundings to worship truth and justice. He developed in them a sense of duty, consistency at work, and kindness for others. And Stanisław Łępicki added, by his own example, he showed to his environment how one may incorporate the love of truth and justice in their actions. On every level of his activity, both as a scholar and as a man, he treated everyone equally, independently of nationality, religion, or political preferences. Those who could observe his public activities emphasized his tact in processing with many difficult issues and how he was respected. Among Twardowski's students, there were Poles, Ukrainians, and Jews. As it was said, he made no differences between them and always evaluated them according to the rule suum cuique. Dr. Stepan Iwanek, my former student and now my colleague, examined the question of Ukrainians in the Lwów-Warsaw school, and he wrote, in his diaries, regularly written by Twardowski between 1916 and 1936, paragraphs on his Ukrainian students speak for a just and respectful pedagogical attitude of the founder of the school. This makes clear the fact that nationality did not make any difference to him. And there are also some examples, perhaps you know them, but maybe it's good to recollect some of them. February 1st, 1921, Tuesday, on an exam entered for. Before noon, the last exam in this term was to be entered for. Ukrainians, Jews, and Poles took it. None of the Poles passed it well. All the Ukrainians passed, and of the Jews. Only one Jew had no luck, perhaps not without the examiner's fault. And another note in the diary from 1927, yesterday at noon, a deputation consisting of 2 Ukrainians and 1 Jew came to me asking to do something with the fact that the first seminar in psychology scheduled for the third trimester, was to make place on April 22nd, which was Good Friday in Greek calendar and a Jewish holiday. I declared that I would excuse those Ukrainians and Jews who would not attend the first seminar, and the seminar itself would be conducted in a way that their absence wouldn't give them a disadvantage. Twardowski's attitude towards Ukrainians may be also certified in his support to Stepan Balej's academic career. Now, Kazimierz Twardowski's attitude towards Jews was similar, and here are some examples. Let me quote at least one. Twardowski noted on March the 6th, 1921, this morning when I was approaching the university, I came across a gate surrounded by students. The strike, whether due to yesterday's encounter of the youth with the police resulting from a youth demonstration on St. Mary's Square in relation to the election of 2 Jews from Lviv to the parliament, or because of the very election of those Jews from Lviv itself, no students were allowed in, and no seminars were conducted today. When I was already upstairs, a group of students broke into the staircase and seminar corridor, wanting one Jewish student who had reached the reading room to be removed from the building. I showed them the door and then personally accompanied this Jew as far as to the gate of Kościuszko Street. Another example of Twardowski's just attitude towards Jews is the case of Alfred Tarski, which is an interesting history, because it is often said that Tarski did not got a chair of logic because of his Jewish origin. Well, in fact, Twardowski supported strongly Tarski's offer from chair of logic in Lviv. but it was given to Leon Chwistek probably because of Bertrand Russell's support. Now let's move to Kazimierz Twardowski's attitude to women. Twardowski appreciated well-educated women. He initiated establishing a gymnasium for women. He had 3 daughters and all of them attended these schools and became very well educated. He organized academic courses for women and gave regular lectures within these courses. He supported the presence of women in regular academic training. He also held a function of something we may call today women's right ombudsman at the University of Lviv. It was emphasized that he fulfilled this function always with the feeling of justice and tact. Twardowski was beloved by his female students, and they were treated by him with respect. He made pictures with members of his seminar almost every year, and we may see that amount of women in Twardowski's seminar was increasing in his environment. Now I will show some of these pictures. I like to showing that because this amount of women is really increasing. This is Twardowski's seminar about 1905, and we see 2 female representatives, 2 female students among them. Now we've got Twardowski's seminar about 1910 with 3 female representatives. Now Twardowski's students, kind of unofficial picture, but once again 3 ladies. Twardowski's seminar around 1920, and there is a plenty of female students here, as you may see. And finally, probably the last picture of Twardowski's among members of his seminars, and the majority of his students were female at that time. It was probably in 1928. We may see Izydora Domska. She is sitting on the right from Twardowski. Professor Igor Kariwec will talk today about some views of Izydora Domska. She was the last Twardowski's assistant and one of his most beloved students. And these are some facts. Among 45 philosophical dissertations prepared under the supervision of Twardowski, 11 were written by female students. So it was about 25% of all promoted doctors by Twardowski. This is the list of these female students: Izydora Domska, Zofia Pasławska-Drexler, Helena Dubieńska-Witwicka, Eugenia Ginsberg-Blaustein, Daniela Gromska, Irena Krampner-Fischbein, Maria Kokoszyńska-Lutmanowa, Seweryna Uszczewska-Romanowa, Irena Jawicówna Panenkowa. She was the first female doctor promoted by Twardowski, and he called her moja pierwsza doktorka, my first female doctor. And finally, Helena Słoniewska and Józefina Spinerówna-Melbeck. And the significant facts I would like to mention are that, for instance, the last person which Twardowski promoted as a doctor of philosophy was a woman. It was Łuszczewska. Secondly, the function of his last scientific assistant was performed by a woman. It was Izydora Domska. And the duties of the editor-in-chief of Ruch Filozoficzny, it was an important periodical founded and guided by Twardowski, was given to a woman. It was Daniela Gromska. And a short comment by Peter Simons about Twardowski's attitude towards women. Let me quote just a part of it because the time is passing. Women students attended Twardowski's seminar before the First World War, when they were still banned in many places. Whether Poland absolutely led in the world in 1914, I don't know. What is striking is the high proportion of excellent female logicians and philosophers the school produced. Now I would like to pass to the question whether Twardowski's activities, Twardowski's sphere of action was somehow motivated by his philosophical and pedagogical views. And I will now shortly comment on that. I would like to show that Twardowski's position, Twardowski's attitude, Twardowski's actions were connected with his pedagogical ideas and with his views on logic and its social role. Twardowski was concerned with social dimension of education. He was convinced that it is school where children should be taught social justice to remove tensions and resolve conflicts. This is what Twardowski wrote in his textbook dedicated to primary school teachers. School, in many respects, is a reflection of the society. Just like in the society, people of different origin and abilities coexist. At school, just like in the society, there are decision makers and subordinates, punishments and rewards, successes and defeats. Creating best conditions for good social relations at school is one of the most important tasks of a teacher. Other important task is to make the students aware that although there are differences between them, all students have an important social role to play, and the true value of human beings does not consist in their fortunate or social position and in any external merits, but solely in their character and social utility. He also wrote, envy should be replaced by other students' success, and the spirit of solidarity would incline those who have more to help those who have to help those who have less, to help the weaker. And finally, the teacher's example is crucial when it comes to arousing the feeling of justice in students. With respect to all students, the teacher should behave in such a way so that none of them would feel wronged, and especially those students who are handicapped in any direction should not feel that their handicap could incline the teacher to treat them differently. Issues such as nationality, religion, social position of students and personal relations between the teacher and students' parents should not influence the teacher's behavior. And the second element where, according to me, this philosophical position of Twardowski coincides with his attitude in all his life and his ideal of justice, social justice, is the problem of logical education, which should serve the society. Twardowski wrote, not only does a lack of knowledge of logic reduce the intellectual level in the theory, but it also brings ignorance and inconsistency to the practical application of our thoughts. All this practical application, the practical application of this logical knowledge is our entire life. Logical education, by providing knowledge of what criticism is about, not only allows you to take a rational attitude in the sphere of beliefs, but also helps to control the irrational part of the psyche. Critical thinking protects against both narrow dogmatism and destructive skepticism. This is of a great importance not only for scientific research, but also for practical life, because only thanks to criticism can man protect oneself from overconfidence and against disregarding someone else's opinion, and at the same time keeping the right balance between exuberant emotionality and infertile coldness. And coming to some closing remarks. I would like to stress that Twardowski's example was followed by his students who realized similar values in their own societies, in their own environments. For instance, in Warsaw, a similar role was played by Tadeusz Kotarbiński. Also, Ajdukiewicz, Czyżowski, Witwicki, and others contributed in many ways to the social justice. For Twardowski and members of his school, their actions were a continuation of their thought. And finally, fight for social justice was for them a manifestation of anti-irrationalism in practical life, since all kinds of discriminations are results of irrational prejudices. And I would like to end with a quotation from Izydora Domska, perhaps in connection to Professor Kariwet's paper. Izydora Domska emphasized this axiological elements in the philosophy of Twardowski and his school. She wrote, a characteristic feature of the Lvov-Warsaw school was the emphasis placed expressis verbis on implicity, on axiological moments, on moral values that are assumed at the same time generated by practicing philosophy, on its peculiar ethos that shapes the meaning of a philosopher's life. Once again, thank you for choosing these important problems of ethics as the subject of the roundtable. Thank you for attention and for invitation. Thank you very much.